Tom, I'll start with you. When I say the word Tevis, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
Tough canyons, heat, and a whole hell of a lot of fun.
And Jerry, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think of Tevis?
It's tough.
And I'm from Stockholm, Sweden, and I'm here to do the Tevis for the first time in my life. I'm really looking forward to that. I've read about the Tevis and I've seen videos from the Tevis for many, many times, and I really thought I want to do this sometime in my life.
I've told people for years that Tevis was like a drug, and that it's one of those events that once you do it, you either are totally hooked or you'll never touch it again.
When you see some people with that 1,000-mile buckle, I said, I want to get one of those. And that was my goal. Took 18 years to do it, but we did it.
So it wasn't just a buckle. You wanted
missed
1,000
missed
buckles.
one ride in
1,000
18
miles.
years, and that's when we had our baby boy, and I couldn't hardly ride while wife's having a baby. So yeah, but other than that, I was diehard.
Well, I brought Merlin Hunter, was babysitting for him. That was the year we went through White Oak Flat, 1997, and Colt was 7 months old, maybe 8 months old. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was great.
So, you were talking about that was 1997.
Yes.
With your son.
Yes.
And so what was the first year you rode Tevis?
97.
In 97.
Yeah. Oh, actually, I'm sorry. It was 98 that he came. 97, he was born in November. Actually, he was born on the Marine Corps birthday, November 10th, 1997. So Tevis was obviously prior to his birth in 97. So it was 98 when Marilyn Hunter babysat him for me. So 97 was my first Tevis.
Okay. So what even got you inspired about doing this incredible ride?
That's a great question, Matt. I had been riding endurance for a number of years. I've been doing ride and tie for a whole lot of years. And I knew about the Tevis. My wife and I were from Southern California, so we did much of the endurance races down that area. Mm-hmm. And I crewed for a friend of mine, and came up and crewed for him for 1 year, and I had and that was in the early 90s, and I got the bug. So that's what kind of got me into wanting to do the Tevis myself.
Now, I just did an interview with Chuck Mather, and
I'm sorry. I'm very sorry you did that.
Actually, it was quite pleasant.
Oh, was it?
He's run it as well as ridden it, and you're one of those few people that have done that as well. Did you run it prior to doing the Tevis?
No,
or-
I've never
Oh, I
run the
thought you
Western
haven't.
States. No,
Okay.
I
You've
paced.
been a runner.
I've been a runner, but I paced all kinds of
Okay.
people on the Western States run. I've never been able to run more than 50 miles.
Uh-huh.
I just give out. And if you've ever seen me run, I think you would know why. I kind of run a little cattywampus due to a motorcycle accident many, many, many years ago. But I paced a large number of athletes
Okay.
through the Western States, normally from Forest Hill down.
And you did ride and tie.
I did ride and tie from the early 80s all the way through, mid 2000. In fact, my wife and I put on the ride and tie championships at Your Valley.
Okay.
2000, 2001, and 2002.
Now, where did your horse background come from? Did you have a horse background prior to ride and tie?
When I was in the Marine Corps, I lived down in a place near Camp Pendleton called Vista. And pretty rural back then. This was late 70s. And I just got interested I remember I got a backyard horse on Morgan. And I just started riding with some folks. And I remember an old gentleman who had a Clydesdale. He was a little man, had a Clydesdale. And I was a kind of a big guy and I had a small Morgan. So we would go out and ride together up in the Palomar Mountains in Vista. And I just fell in love with riding. And then I got involved with ride and tie. And that was did the Cuyamaca ride and tie in like 85 or 86. And that was so much fun. In fact, I've always said that's the most fun you can do with your clothes on, ride and tie. And that's how I got the bug with racing.
Now, Jerry, we were just talking prior to us sitting down. You did ride and tie as well. You were a ride and tire.
I did, yeah, the very first one in 1971 from St. Helena Airport to the Sonoma Square. And I think the sheriff there, he was barbecuing and cutting meat or something like that, and he cut his trigger finger off.
I hope they found it.
He put it back on.
So when you started in 71 doing the ride and tie, so was it prior to doing Tevis? Was that what got you started into the
I
horses?
started actually in I've had a horse ever since I was 7 years old.
Okay.
Lived in Colma, used to ride the horse out where Ceremony is now. There were no homes there, out in Westlake. And I think I was the first, they just put a new bridge going across Lake Merced, and I was the first one to ride a horse over that bridge.
Wow.
And then got started in competitive trail riding, which is a really good way to learn in the 60s, in the mid 60s. And we would go on rides to Wyoming, Colorado, and where you're judged, for both your horsemanship and and how you ride. They would have some of the judges would be up in trees when you're and spotting you at a creek crossing or something like that, and then you get a scorecard each time.
And that was in ATRC.
That was an ATRC, yes.
Yeah, well, let's talk about NATRC for a moment, because it's interesting, in your era of endurance riding, NATRC was very strong.
It was,
It was a big thing to do, and it was also meant to help you transition into the sport of endurance. It could help you transition.
And what fun times! I mean, the people were so nice that you would meet there. We would be in a camper there, in a small camper. There would be 8-10 people in a camper. They're shoved up in the loft up in the back or something, just gathering together, talking and everything. I mean, really, really nice people. Yeah.
So what year was your first Tevis?
It was 1970.
1970.
Yeah, same year I got married.
And what was the draw to
We
doing the 100 miles?
I lived in San Bruno and had a horse at a stable there at Crystal Springs Reservoir, and some gal who I ended up marrying came in with an Arabian horse, and she was a member of Diablo Arabians over in Alamo or Danville. And invited to the women's club there, and they had guest speaker was Donna Fitzgerald, Bev Tibbetts, and Walt Tibbetts. And we met them and talked to them, and later on, talking to Walt and Bev, they were so nice, they invited us over to their house, and ended up, he was in real estate, he sold us a house just over the next canyon from him. So he was my inspiration. We had so many good times on different rides together.
Well, Walt seemed to have inspired a lot of people
Oh,
and
yeah.
mentored a lot of people into this sport.
Yeah.
And you mentioned Donna Fitzgerald, you know, another one of our icons in our
Yeah,
in
she had
Tevis
quite
and
a
the
record.
sport.
I think maybe 4 or 5 times straight. She was the winner, and Pat Fitzgerald was awful
Yeah,
good
he was
too.
a great horseman.
Yes, he was.
Yeah.
Tough guy.
So, Tom, you know, you mentioned you had a Morgan to start with,
Yes.
and then the Ride and Tie kind of was inspiring you a little bit. When was your first? When did you get your first Arab?
So I was in Ride and Tie. A friend of mine had a Arab that we started racing. The name of that horse was Superman. Yeah, kind of a knucklehead Arab, but pretty fast. So I transitioned into Arabs after I got a taste of the speed and the endurance of the Arab horse. And then I started, my good friend Emmett Ross was, lived near us down in San Diego area. And he had a couple Arabs, so we would ride a lot, Emmett and myself, and we would ride. And I just basically adopted and started owning Arabs after that. I sold the Morgan. I had a quarter horse at the time. And so my life was Arabians for the next 40 years until about a month ago when I got a Mustang. But I've had Arabians all this time, and I've had wonderful, wonderful rides on them, and wonderful Ride and Ties, and wonderful endurance rides, and wonderful Tevises.
You might enjoy that Mustang.
I just spent a week with Jerry last week, and Chuck and Mike, and we had a wonderful time.
Yeah, I just did Virginia City on a Mustang.
Yeah.
Jerry, you mentioned that you started riding when you were 7 years old, and like I asked, Tom, I mean, did you start off with Arabs, or did you kind of progress into them
first
later?
horse my dad bought me was a buckskin quarter horse, and then I had another quarter horse, but on the competitive rides. But they didn't judge out that good on the rides because of their heavy loads, and they would have filling and stuff in the pitlocks in the morning where the Arab, the little tight little skinny legs, they're all tight, and so I said, I think I got to get one of those. So I've had up to 7 horses at one time altogether.
But we talked about 1971, first Tevis, correct?
Right.
But you have how many buckles?
I have 1,000-mile buckle.
You have your
Yeah.
10 buckles. So
Yeah.
you said earlier in the interview your goal was to get
That
that
was
10
my goal, yeah.
buckles, and you did it. How many attempts did it take to get your 10 buckles?
18 times, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you're still ahead of the average.
Yeah,
with
pretty
the-
much so, yeah.
Yeah. When was your last?
Was it
Tevis?
89?
89.
Yeah.
And the thing that Jerry, you and I met you briefly at the Tevis this year. That was the first time I got the honor of meeting you. But I hear your name brought up because you've been a mentor to a lot of riders.
That's
You've
what
been one
I've
of
been
those
told,
people
but I
that
didn't
have, they'll bring up your name and they'll say, Jerry's the one that taught me. I mean, it's an important part of our sport is to share, and you have been one of those kinds of
Because
riders.
on the rides, I'm sure I was crabby as all hell, because I had a goal there, and I didn't want anything to go, well, what can go wrong.
Right.
I mean, and so, I didn't pay much attention to, talking to people, riding or anything. I just, straight line is get there the best you can.
Well, that's good advice. So, one of the most important parts with Western States Trail Foundation is education. is helping other riders and mentoring other riders. And I know both of you have done that. Tom, you've helped a lot of people in this sport. You know, maybe can you share some of your experiences with helping new riders start this ride and mistakes that you see them make and maybe mistakes you prevented them from making?
Well, I'll take a shot, Jerry.
Yeah.
So when I was honored to be the president of the Western States Trail Foundation for a couple of years, and I remember one of my ideas was to start the education ride. And thank God Kathy Perry stepped up to actually organize it, but that occurred on my watch because I felt it was important to give people a taste of the trail in an environment that wasn't quite as stressful as Tevis. And the education ride has gone on, and Terry Reed has done a great job with that, and as have many other volunteers. That event has blossomed into a very good opportunity for folks to learn the pace, for folks to learn the trail, for folks to learn the experience of Tevis without all the stress. So as far as I'm concerned, that's one of the more proud and positive things that I was able to help start with the Tevis. And with respect to others, I have ridden with lots of folks on the trail over many thousands of miles because, in my opinion, you have to train like you ride. And I know I heard it's not a race, but my philosophy, it was a race. I preferred fast horses, and for me, riding a 24-hour, 100-mile ride wasn't where it was at. I was trying to go for the win. So, but in doing that, you have to know your horse, and you have to know your trail, and you have to know where to push and where not to push. So I rode with lots of people going very fast, but controlled. And a lot of folks rode with me, and we had a lot of fun. And then we had a lot of beers afterwards.
That's part of the fun.
That's part of the fun.
And Jerry?
The junior program
the
is
junior program.
really nice. I know, I think, was it last year or something, they didn't have any, and so this year, I think they even paid the entries for some of the juniors to have more juniors. And I know I've picked up juniors on the ride where their sponsor was out and they rode in with me, and it's almost like hunting. They should have more, if you don't teach the juniors how to hunt, well, then you don't have hunters in the future. Same thing with riding.
That's right. Who do you look at that was a big influence on you that brought you into this sport? You mentioned Walt Tibbetts. I mean, are there any other names that from the past that may have, inspired you to?
Ed Johnson, actually.
No kidding.
Ed Johnson, he was so straight up when he rode, and when he would want to pass, he would say trail, and I mean he would jump over these bushes like that and go and he was my hero. Quiet guy, but he could ride.
And Ed Johnson rode Bezetol.
Yes.
And
also Bud Darty too
and Bud Darty is another one.
Bud Darty took the longest to get his last buckle, and I kept on saying, "Slow down, Bud, slow down." And finally, I think he slowed down and got his. But he has the record for having 9 buckles and taking the longest to get the 10th.
But he did it.
Yeah, he did it.
And Tom, how about you? Who's been inspirational to you?
Well, I mentioned Emmett Ross, a dear friend of mine, best man at Laura and my wedding. Boys on Telly was actually, because he put on a ride called the Malibu 50 down in Southern California. I did that a number of times and met Boyd, and I really was, he moved fast. He had the same philosophy that I did, and he was very good in the saddle. And so I would, Boyd, I talked and learned a lot from Boyd, and Emmett, of course. And Emmett's gone on to do a lot with our sport internationally. And So those were the two, I think, that really helped me focus and learn to ride in a way that was competitive.
Yeah. You know, Jerry, we were looking at pictures prior to our interview here, and you have a photo of you going over Cougar Rock, and you know, in the 70s, and it was minimal back then. I mean, you know, people didn't have the water bottles, the helmets. I mean, you know, and so you were at Tevis this year. When you see what we're doing nowadays versus back then, I mean, you know, what are you thinking?
I have to ask questions. I say, what's that thing on top of their helmet there? And that's a GPS or something. I said, GPS? and why are you wearing 3 watches? And one's for the heart rate, and one's, I mean, these are all, you know, my first water bottle was a shampoo bottle that I rinsed out, and when first time I used it, it had soap suds still. And you know, we used, I see them doing syringes with electrolytes, and I see the tennis shoes that they're wearing, and I see they cool off the horse with a garden sprayer to spray them. I mean, all kinds of stuff, and the crews that they have now. I mean, you see crews with 5, 6 people and you don't, now that you really don't even need a crew with all the help they have. You come into a stop, they've got somebody's right there sponging off your horse, and somebody else is getting you a sandwich or a piece of watermelon. I think it's just fabulous, the help that they have on the rides of all the volunteers.
Tom,
Yeah.
you know, what do you think, like, of all the rides you've done, what was the most challenging Tevis that you had?
Well, I had some pretty successful Tevises. 97, 98, 99, the first 3 years I rode it, I finished. I think the first year was a little bit of disappointment because I was running with a lot of top riders, and we took a wrong turn at Kavanaugh Ridge, and ended up taking a N44 to Dusty Corners, which wasn't the trail, but everybody in the top 10 did that same loop, except for the 2 leaders, which were two ladies were in front, Kathy Majors and Marsha Smith. And then the next bunch of us, including Hal Hall, we all, because it was not flagged real well. And that was my first Tevis, and I hadn't ridden that section. So I ended up finishing 16th overall, but got a completion because basically, so that was tough emotionally, 97. So I vowed to do better, and the next year, 98, I think I finished 3rd or 4th. And then the next year, 4th or 3rd, I can't remember which. And then I had 2 years where I was pulled, and that brought me back to reality. And I think you were my shoer at that point. I had a great horse, Huckleberry. So I just thought I was always going to finish, right? The odds weren't going to hit me. But that first pull, I just, you know, it dawned on me that, you know, it doesn't go on forever. And emotionally, I was devastated when I was pulled. But it was the right call. The horse was a little off. He was lame. And then I tried the next year, same issue. The only good thing was I was pulled early, you know, like Red Star. And so, but the most difficult ride I think I did was the following year. After 2 years of being pulled, I brought that horse back and had a fantastic ride. And the reason it was so difficult is I was very conscious of where he was at, and I was off running a whole lot, ran the canyons down, tailed up, and I was really watching my horse, and he came through like a champ. But physically, it was very, very, very difficult. It was a hot year. I think that was 2001, and but it paid off at the end. I can't remember, it was a fifth or a fourth or whatever it was in that year. But then I skipped a few years because I retired that horse and was bringing up another horse, and did the classic amateur mistake. I overtrained, and this was 2007. My horse was fabulous, a horse named Tallahassee. Tallahassee's Fire. It was just a hot horse. And I actually, in conditioning him, I overtrained and had a curb injury on the hind. And I knew it about 2 weeks before Tevis. I knew it, but I thought I could sneak it through if I slowed him down. But that horse wasn't going to slow down.
Yeah.
So I was pretty well brokenhearted because that hurt me. A lot of all year training, and then the day of the ride, I mean, literally all year training. I mean, it was our life for, 3 nights a week and weekends. So you invest that much time and you blow it because it's a human issue, not a horse issue. I blew it, not the horse.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
that was an emotional letdown.
Yeah, it's always tough,
Yeah.
And you're right, I mean, you have to, at the end of the day, you're the one that has to take the responsibility.
Yes.
And Jerry, how about you? I mean, of
My-
all the rides
my
you've
most
done,
difficult was just my wife wanted to ride the ride, and so we rode in 1972 together. And the horses are stabled next to each other. I mean, so they're pals. So I was so intense on getting out, so I didn't see her anymore, that I left my hat at home. So I didn't have a hat. I'm out that riding, and I was way out. I was in 13th position going up the. We're White Oaks flat now, but there used to be like a resort up there. There was a swimming pool and everything, and there was a water trough down just before you climbed up there. And I went up to the water trough, and I had a heat stroke, and I passed out and fell on the ground right there. And Dr. Zimmerman was there. He was riding at the time. He says, "You okay?" And I says, "Yeah, I think I'm all right." So I got back on the horse, and I'm going up the hill, and I'm seeing monsters and dragons that are coming out, and I mean, it was scary. I mean, and I'm throwing up, of course. So I get in, and the horse, I'm in 13th position, and the horse is running around in circles there, and they can't pick up a pulse on me. So I have to go to the hospital. So I had cramps in my legs, and my crew poured some Absorbing Junior down my pants, and it ran into, and it burned like you couldn't believe. So I got a ride to the hospital, and the nurses are going, they said, "What is that?" And I explained to it's horse liniment, and it was burning. And so I think I just had some salt tablets, and nobody wanted to put my dirty shirt on and finish the ride, but that was, I guess, my most. And in 1983, when they started over at Soda Springs, like did this time, I got way out in front, and there was 3 of us that were running. We were in Rucky Chucky, and it was daylight like you can't believe, and the horse was tired. And Dr. Cook said, that your horse is tired. And I said, "I'd really like to finish for completion." And he says, "I'll tell you what, if you give me your word, you'll lead the horse on in, I'll let you go." And so I'm leading the horse on in the last 18 miles, and 3 people came up to me and said, "Well, you're number 84. Your Dr. Cook sent us out to check on you," and so we still came in the top 10. And after walking in the last 18 miles,
Wow.
But he was tired, and we got our buckle all right. But that was probably my most exciting ride.
What's interesting to me is you're bringing up names of people we just recently, Marilyn Hunter, you brought up Marilyn.
She was an NATRC
She was
gal.
a
Oh,
great
sure.
NATRC rider
Yeah.
and very influential and a great mentor to a lot of people. We recently lost Marilyn. You brought up Dr. Hank Cook, another ride vet that was a part of Tevis from early days. we just recently lost
Well, he sure
him.
called a spade too. He was so funny.
Todd Nelson.
And then we just recently lost Todd
Yeah.
Nelson,
Yeah.
another great Tevis vet and endurance vet.
Yeah.
And so,
Nice people that you meet on these rides there,
Yeah.
for sure.
yeah. Tom, you mentioned that you were part of the Western States Trail Foundation. Are you still a board member? You're still a board member, or
I'm
emeritus?
emeritus now,
Emeritus.
yes.
And
I try to help out as much as I can.
well, you've been involved in so many aspects of this ride, and so you were president of the board,
Right.
and being part of the board and watching the direction that our ride is going. And where do you want to see the future? What do you want to see? Where do you want to see Tevis in 10 years?
Well, I want to make sure Tevis is here in 10 years, and that's the purpose of the board, to ensure that our ride lasts forever. And the board has the resources to put on the ride and the related functions. It's not just the ride. The mission of the board is multifaceted, including education and preserving the Western heritage and the trail. So I think that I'm very pleased with the board actually now. And I love the fact that that some of the folks I don't know, because they're new and they're getting involved and they're donating their time. What I want this ride to be in 10 years is I want a ride to be here in 10 years. And I would love to, I'm going to maybe speak like a heretic, but I would think the board might want to consider reinstalling the weight limit for the Tevis Cup winner. That's one of the small areas that I disagreed with the majority of the board in the early 2000s when we basically did away with a 165-pound rider and tack for the Tevis Cup. And, excuse me, the Hagen Cup. I'm sorry, the best condition, not the Tevis Cup. And that was done for logistics reasons, and, there was a lot of science that basically said it didn't matter. But in my opinion, being a heavyweight rider all my career, I'm pretty sure that a horse carrying 240, 250 pounds over 100 miles versus a horse carrying 130, there is a difference on the condition of that horse at the end of 100 miles. So in 10 years, I would like the board in that time frame to perhaps revisit that. And, in AERC, there is a weight benefit or penalty for best condition. Their rules allow that. In our rules, we abandon it.
Both of you are runners, have been runners, and so I know you did a lot of leg work on the ride. You got off and ran the canyons, and
Yep.
maybe even ran out of a couple canyons or a
Yep.
canyon. That's another aspect that has been brought up in our ride too. Is that we get world-class runners that can. What is your opinion on that?
Well, my opinion is anything you can do to help the horse, you should. And if you have the ability to get off, whether it's running or walking or tailing, you should, if you feel that will help the horse. I admire folks that do their groundwork and run the canyons, and anybody. And again, I'm sensitive to the folks that can't do that physically. But again, if you got a competitive advantage, why not take advantage of it?
Right, and Jerry.
On the first ride and tie they had world-class runners there, but they didn't know how to ride. They didn't know how to gauge a horse. And there were 3 dead horses on the thing that we had to walk over to get thing, because they think that you just get on them and go full bore, not knowing not knowing the horse. And in order to that's why I think it's good for the person that's riding the horse to condition the horse. instead of having somebody else condition the horse, which I know people used to do, rather than, then you get to know the horse and you know they're, you know, when something's wrong, yeah, they'll talk to you.
Yeah, that's true.
I want to make sure that we get, you know, important things that you feel.
I was
important for
really
the public to
excited
hear.
this year on the ride, on that medallion that they had of Wendell Roby, the bust of Wendell Roby with out of his
5-horse,
canteen, yeah.
uh-huh.
And my horse got one of those.
It did.
Which, so it was
Okay.
really,
Okay.
not riding the ride, but I was excited as those people getting their buckles there.
Now, I would like to talk a little
Okay.
bit about the partnerships and how important it is to maintain relationships with the agencies and public-private partnerships. I think that's really important.
Okay, so we'll hit on that first. Well, because we're still on kind of the board
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I'll come up with a way of asking, you
Yeah.
know, getting that rolling. And then
Because that's what led to the start this year at Soda Springs, was the fact that we had contributed to the Royal Gorge purchase. And that allowed us to have some leverage in negotiations.
Okay, all right. Tom, being involved in the politics
Right.
with the board, you know, dealing with all the different agencies and aspects of just keeping this trail going politically. I know you've been involved heavily in that. What have been your challenges?
I think the challenges have been to continue to maintain good relationships with the federal agencies and the state agencies. You know, sometimes it can be rocky, especially their timeline may be different than our timeline on events. Case in point is we've been trying to get improvements to the Auburn staging area for 5, 6, 7 years, and we've yet to move that forward aggressively. But I think it's important that the board not only garner and maintain and dispense the resources to put on the ride, but also maintain relationships with those federal agencies, nonprofits, and state agencies. And a case in point, I think we contributed to, we did contribute to the Royal Gorge purchase a few years ago with the Truckee Donner Land Trust, and that gave us a segue into allowing the ride to be started at Van Norden Meadow this year, because we were a participating contributor to that purchase. Same thing with the Granite Sheep Wilderness. We contributed financially, and that gives us some leverage. We're at the table now. And I think, and I would encourage our board to continue those, look forward and continue those relationships, and where we can participate financially for the public good, for the good of the horsemen and equestrian community, we should. We should continue that, because Western States is a class act. The board needs to be aware of the politics, and there are folks out there that will jump if there's a problem. So we need to have defenders to defend our organization. And we've done a good job. We just need to continue to do a good job.
And think forward.
And think forward and continue to look out to protect our community, our equestrian community, and our trails. If we don't, there'll be encroachment. Everything from private land, multi-use trails that may or may not be compatible with horses. And the way you continue to position yourself is get in front of it and build those relationships with the political class, with the jurisdictions, and with the agencies.
And Jerry, you know, oh my gosh, I mean, as much as you've been involved in the horses and Tevis, and you're a horseman, and you are a true horseman, and that's everybody out there that knows you says that about you. You also.
Well, he rides a mule now, so it's.
Well, is that a mule man? You're a mule,
It's a
you're
mule
becoming
man.
a mule man now. Okay. Well, you know, I know that there's things that you are seeing in the Tevis that you're liking, that's been going on here in the present. And you mentioned that about the Wendell Roby Award. And so maybe you can tell us a little bit about that and your success with that.
Well, that was a really nice, they do something different each year, which is really nice. And I thought that was really special to receive that. I think Mike said there were only, I don't know, 30-something or 40-something that got that award, which is
It's a horse. You're one of your horses that you rode.
finished more than five times.
Five
Yeah. And the same horse had over 1,000 miles in competitive trail riding also. So,
What was the name of that horse?
That was Sama.
Sama.
And you take care of them, they take care of you. All right, yeah.
I'd like to introduce my wife, Debbie Lyon, and Debbie is going to read the names of the 57 horses that have finished 5 Tevises, and some of them 6, and some of them 10, and some of them 13. And they'll all get a medallion with the bas relief of this trophy, and on the back it says 500-mile horse.
What do you think about the level of horsemanship in our sport today?
You see some pretty good riders out there. I've noticed that, how they're posting and everything, and but it's a lot different than than it was in the past.
Do you think they should all go back and do some NATRC?
Oh no, they look like they're doing all right. Just the tight pants and helmets and everything are really. Before you could get away with cheating on the ride. When they have GPS now, you can't cheat. They know where you're all at the time.
That's right. Yeah. Well, Tom, I want to thank you so much.
Yeah, and Matt, I want to make one comment. I failed to mention one of my dear friends, Bill Piper, who
Yes.
passed recently. Bill was a longtime board member, president for many years of Western States Trail Foundation, and really a dear friend of mine. And I'm so glad that we honor him with Piper Junction. He's a man that deserves a legacy. And he was an inspiration to a lot of us, a hard worker and a true horseman.
He was a true horseman.
Yes, he was.
You just didn't want to hand him the microphone at the dinners. That's all.
That's true, Jerry. But God bless his soul. And I was blessed and honored when Mike and Chuck and I spread his ashes on the trail. We also sent a little bit up to started the Tevis a couple years ago, and he was spread over Cougar Rock. Kathy Perry carried some, and Jeff Hurton and Debbie Lyon carried some too. But Bill is on the trail, guaranteed.
You'll always be with us. And Piper Junction is just outside of Michigan Bluff.
Yes, it's
where we do our vet check now.
Yes, it's the old Chicken Hawk.
Right.
Forest Service will not let us call it officially.
Well, us
Piper
Tevis
Junction.
riders will call it Piper
Yes,
Junction.
we should.
Yes.
And I'm gonna take the credit because I named it that.
And he earned it.
He did earn it.
He earned
He
it.
did earn it.
Tom, thank you so much for
Thank you, Matt.
everything you have done for our ride, our
Thank you.
sport, and just being a good man that has inspired a lot of people.
Well, thank you, Matt.
And Jerry, it was an honor getting to talk to you and get to know you better. And I hope to maybe go for a ride with you sometime.
Well, that'd be
So,
great.
All right. Well, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you.
This is where it all began, and this ride is so difficult to finish. You have a 50-50 chance of making it into Auburn. So by those definitions, it is the most significant ride that I believe that you can do.